Good afternoon. Today is Monday, the 23rd of June, 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. Delighted to have Ben Rubin with me in the studio. And we're joined by Diane Rasmussen-McCaddy by live video link. Well, it's winter drawing on now. Summer solstice is over, Ben.
And it's nearly Christmas, Brian.
We won't take it that far. It's a lovely day in Plymouth, and of course we had very mixed weather over much of UK over the weekend. We did have the longest day, but we're going to look forward to more summer. So let's stick with that lovely theme in our head. Now, our regular viewers will know that UK Column often comes in at a different angle from other reports. And one of the things that certainly Ben and myself and Diane have been looking at over quite a few weeks is what is going on in this country. And we're going to encourage our audience today to stay calm, carry on, and have a look at what's happening in this country before you start to judge what's happening overseas. And there's no other place to start, unfortunately, than with Keir Starmer. Now, probably I should have had a bigger photo of him, but here he is, spewing words of wisdom about what's happening in the Middle East. And how can we describe this man? I don't trust him at all. Flaccid is another term I would use to describe him. But the key point is that this man is running a death cult. Now, some of this has been up on UK Column over the last few days, but of course we've got the assisted dying bill, that is about death. And we've also got the decriminalisation of abortion, that is also about death of babies. We have a massive censorship campaign running under the surface, and the UK Column has been warning about this for a great many years. We've also got unlimited propaganda. I asked Ben to suggest me an image before as we were compiling the news today, and Ben said, well, the only thing you should choose is BBC, and he's absolutely correct, but a massive propaganda campaign running 24 hours a day in the UK. We've got the grooming gang smokescreen, and I'm going to say to the audience today, if you think that I am banging on about this particular subject, I can tell you, you are going to hear more and more and more about child abuse, because this is a subject the government knows it can use in order to distract the public from what is going on in other key areas. People are going to get more and more passionate about this as more and more vile stuff comes to the surface. But of course, the government can also inflame one group of the community against another. So grooming gangs, exceptionally dangerous. Diane is going to be talking about this a little bit more. But of course, we've also got this happening, and Ben in particular has been delving into this subject, the destruction of our constitution. And where is this all leading at the moment? Well, not only the demise of UK, but the fact we've now got these horrific war zones, which UK, Keir Starmer's government now, we can see very clearly, have helped to foment. And what does it look like on the front line? Well, if we just move forward and have a look at some of the images from the Middle East, we will see that there are some really bad things happening. And Keir Starmer's involved. Who's he working for? Is it for the World Economic Forum? Is it for UK, or is it for Israel? We don't know. Let's have a look at some of the images here. I have not chosen anything too horrific, but nevertheless, we're going to have a look at what is represented here as this as this conflict unfolds, not only in Israel and Gaza and with Iran, but also in other parts of the world, such as Ukraine. We've got some shots here of Iranian drones and missiles coming in over Israel. This is a direct hit on one of the Iron Dome sites with a missile cooking off. So there is no doubt that Iran is doing tremendous damage in Israel at the moment, although the BBC doesn't want to report it. And conversely, of course, we've still got horrific damage in Iran by the Israeli forces. Now, I don't know what this location is, but by the colour of the smoke, there is something industrial, whether that's fuel or chemicals burning off. And then we get to the bizarre situation where, of course, we have this message, "Thank you, Mr. President Trump," posted up in Tel Aviv. Childish behavior by Israel as a nation state, and apparently we should be grateful to Trump. I don't think so. Diane, let's bring you in because, of course, you've picked up that across UK, if you go into a hotel, if you go into a pub or a club, you're very likely to see a TV screen, which will be the BBC, simply rolling and rolling propaganda about what's happening in the world. And you've picked up on this particular image. Tell us a bit more about it.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Hello, Ben. Happy to be here today. I was just watching the BBC yesterday morning, just so that the audience doesn't have to. And this particular image was up on the screen for a couple of minutes, and I just took a photo of it from my own television. There's a number of things going on here, I think, in this photo. One is that we see that BBC Verify and Mariana Spring and the rest of her team were obviously being kind enough to tell us exactly where the U.S. bombed the nuclear sites in Iran. So it's really good to know that they've got our best interest at heart so that we see the actual Google Earth image or whatever it is. You also have the convenience of picking up your phone and scanning the QR code to find out even more, which is wonderful news because then they know that you've got your phone on you at all times and that you're looking at the right things at the right times. Which is really interesting as well is that the ticker at the bottom says that the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, is gravely alarmed by the use of force by the U.S. against Iran, which is all part of the confusion that I believe we'll be covering a little bit later in the news, Brian.
Yes, 24-hour-a-day propaganda by the BBC, and certainly the UK column audience is noticing that what they don't want to cover is the destruction in either Ukraine. We don't talk about the real damage to the Ukrainian economy or the people or the Ukrainian military. Don't want to give the UK public the truth there. And the same is now happening with regard to Israel and Iran, that we are not to be told the suffering going on inside Israel as a result of clearly very large Iranian attacks hitting home. So the UK public treated as children, particularly by the BBC, and it's up to alternative media channels such as the UK column to get the top off this. But aside from that propaganda, Diane, you've also been having a look at what it's going to cost to set up some of these inquiries.
Yeah, the inquiries as well as the outcomes of them, including the redress schemes. So if we go back quickly to October of 2022, when we first saw the release of the report of the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse in England, there were several recommendations that came out of that report. Of course, this cost millions of pounds and cost many of years to complete. It was released in October of 2022. One of the main recommendations from the report was to set up a redress scheme. What we're now hearing is, of course, we don't have the money to cover the redress scheme because there have been so many children who suffered sexual abuse that it could hit up to £10 billion to pay for the redress scheme in England. £10 billion. And we see, Scotland has a redress scheme, of course, but as we're seeing with the Fernethi residential school ladies, of course, that we've been covering for years, they're currently not eligible for redress despite having the scheme in Scotland because they weren't abused for long enough. Apparently 6 weeks of abuse is not enough to be able to apply for redress, and also because they were not in the correct setting, of course, which is a lie. But anyways, Keir Starmer is now criticizing the previous Conservative government, although the Conservative government was the one that was in power when this was released, for failing to implement what is called the J Review recommendations, and that includes the redress schemes. So even though Keir Starmer is in charge and the Conservative government put it in place, he's now blaming them for not having this available and implementing the 20 recommendations. Just last month, we had released the National Audit on Group-Based Child Exploitation and Abuse, which is the grooming gangs that we've been talking about. This report was led by Baroness Casey of Blackstock, DBECB. She's had a number of high-level government roles over the years. She is now the UK government's lead non-executive director as of January this year, I believe. And so she was in charge of this particular audit. And we've got a quote from here that she provided in the foreword to the report. saying we have seen state and church institutions, residential care, and medical settings all pressured to hold inquiries into historic failings. It cost £5 million for one local inquiry, and that took almost 5 years. If we'd got this right years ago, which of course we didn't, seeing these girls as children raped rather than, quote, wayward teenagers or collaborators in their abuse, collecting ethnicity data and acknowledging as a system that we did not do a good enough job, then I doubt that we would be in this place now. She goes on to say in the executive summary that there were around 500,000 children a year have been likely to experience sexual abuse as children of any kind. And for the vast majority of them, of course, their abuse has not been identified, has not been reported to the police. So the police data is much lower than that. According to the police recorded data, there were just over 100,000 offenses of child sexual abuse and exploitation recorded in 2024. So that's about a fifth of what they think actually happens, with around 60% of them being what they call contact offenses, and the rest are online offenses. Of the contact offenses, an estimated around 17,000 are flagged by the police as child sexual exploitation in the recorded data. The problem is that we do not have reliable data. The only data that is available comes from a new police data set on child sexual exploitation, which is called the Complex and Organized Child Abuse 7 data set, if you want to look it up. And although this has many limitations, it identified only around 700 recorded offenses of group-based child sexual exploitation, so the grooming gang behavior, in 2023. There was an excellent Substack post that came out from Raja Mia last week. So I'd like to show some of what he's said about this. Of course, Ben has interviewed Raja in the past, and we had him as a speaker at our live event on location in Cheltenham. And he has said here, if this is truly about the survivors, then each and every child betrayed by the authorities must be entitled to compensation. We now know that such a compensation scheme could cost up to £10 billion, as I've just said. And he went on to say as well in this article that he basically says that he doesn't think that anything will ever really come out of this. Unfortunately, seems to be quite discouraged about it. He did say, of course, that this national redress scheme was one of those 24 recommendations, as I said. But now he's identifying once again that this proposal has been scrapped because of the cost. As we all know, Raja Mia has done an incredible job over the years for UK Column and everywhere else on identifying this, and has paid the price for it. So I think we should continue to support him, and we need to also continue to make sure that we can put pressure on the government wherever possible to make them accountable for what has happened and protect these 500,000 children per year that are being abused sexually across the country, Brian.
So thank you very much for that. And just to reinforce our opening statement on this, horrific what has been going on over a great many years to do with children in UK can only happen with the full connivance of the establishment and the government. There's no question of that. But what we are saying is watch out, because you're now going to see the government pushing everything to do with child safety, child abuse, because that's the smokescreen to help cover up what it is doing elsewhere. Do we need to stay on the case with children? Yes, but be aware of that smokescreen. And Ben, let's bring you in, because propaganda, censorship, that is unfolding very, very quickly in UK.
Indeed it is, yes. Hello, everybody. And we're going to head over to Demos, the think tank, led by Polly Curtis, the chief executive. And we've actually had some messages over the past few weeks asking why we cover Demos so much. Hopefully this will shed some light on that. And ultimately it's because they are playmaking the censorship industrial complex here in the UK. Let's hear now from Polly Curtis about the launch of the Epistemic Security Network.
So I'm your chair tonight, and tonight we are launching a new network, the Epistemic Security Network. And the aim of this network is to provide a home for the collective efforts to protect democracy by cleaning up our information supply chains. Together, we hope this network, spanning civil society, politics and government, will mobilise evidence and design strategies to protect our democratic supply chains and our future, really. We aim for this network to be a platform for everyone in this room to use, to come together, to find the connections, to find the ideas, and to progress this agenda together. And we have the most, before I even get to the panel, we have the most extraordinary group of people here. I know every one of you in the audience and where you're from, and you really bring such expertise to this conversation. We're very keen that you're part of this conversation going forward.
Well, there we have it, Ben. Information supply chains. These people are desperate because they know the lid's coming off what they're doing, and anybody who's working for that is a direct threat to them. But that's quite a statement, isn't it? Information supply chain.
It is, yes, absolutely. It comes from this report that we talked about earlier in the year, this Demos report, Epistemic Security 2029. It's all focused on the 29 next general election, fortifying the UK's information supply chain. And they define epistemic security as keeping our knowledge safe.
Their knowledge.
Well, quite, exactly. The official narrative, ultimately, and as we've just heard, the official narrative was telling us that there was no issue with grooming gangs across the north of England. Turns out there was an issue with grooming gangs across the north of England, but apparently these people are the people who should be protecting knowledge and telling us what isn't true. Who's in the network? Wow, right? She said, look at the people who are in the room. I'll pick a few names out. Hope Not Hate. Full Fact, who we've spoken about recently. They would essentially, they've got a guy in there running Ofsted at the moment. DCMS are in the room. So you've got civil service and politicians, civil society foundations like the Joe Cox Foundation, Public Interest News Foundation, who I've spoken about previously, which is run by a guy that was exec director of the Fabian Society. Polly Curtis is on the board there. Ofcom. Yeah, the Arbiters of Truth, the British Library, there's a few people there from the library system. Diane, we'll have to talk about that later. The Royal Society, because they have to own science, right? And they actually talk about that in the video. You should go and watch the whole thing, by the way. I'll provide a link. It's about an hour and 20 minutes. Highly recommend it, right? So an extremely powerful network. What are they there to do? They're there to protect liberal democracy. And as I define that, regular viewers will know, is we can do whatever we want if enough people go along with it. And they're also extremely concerned about defending the country against populism. This term has been used quite a bit in recently, and also in that video, which you can go and watch. And the BBC defines this as the idea that society is separated into two groups at odds with one another, the pure people and the corrupt elite. And I think the corrupt elite were probably in that room at Demos last week. And what were they saying up on stage? So three panellists. We'll just give you a quick glimpse into the discussion. So this is Sir John Whittingdale, Conservative MP from Malden since 1992, formerly at DCMS. He actually created the BBC Local Democracy Reporter Scheme. He was happy to let us know. And he says one of the challenges is striking the balance between free speech and disinformation. And obviously, people like him get to decide that. Who else was there? Gina Neff from Cambridge University. She essentially saying that we can't media literacy our way out of this. The plebs are revolting, Brian. The narrative is falling to pieces.
And they're very worried.
They're very worried.
If the audience wants good news, the good news is you can see the narrative of this team coming apart. People are always saying to us, what's the good news? Well, the good news is you can see they're having trouble. What are they having trouble countering? The truth, basically.
Yes.
Facts and the truth.
Exactly. So she says we can't media literacy our way out of the problem. The guy at the BBC on the end there, he actually thinks that you can. This is Ian Bundred, Director of Public Policy at the BBC, who has just arrived there from YouTube. He's been at YouTube for 5 years, so he probably booted us off YouTube, actually. That might have been him. And he said, can we work on a disinformation GCSE? Right? He actually wants to manipulate the education system. And actually, he revealed in this presentation that the BBC News Round, their kind of kids' news program, is actually shown to 3 million young people in their classroom every week. At the moment, I had no idea they were doing that. It didn't used to happen when I was at school. So anyway, who's behind this? Two crucial figures. So this guy, William Perrin, who actually funded the original Demos report, former top policy advisor to Blair, instrumental in creating Ofcom, actually received an OBE for his work on the Online Safety Act, Also, he's married into the Sainsbury's family, interestingly, and he's also funding a lot of other things as well. This guy's fascinating, including the Future Governance Forum. Go and check that out. We'll talk about it more over the next couple of weeks. And then finally, also in the mix, funding this network is the Quadrature Climate Foundation, who are the people that bunged £4 million to Labour just ahead of the general election last year, are also funding the retraining of the UK civil service via a political foundation, and have shelled over $1 billion into 187 organisations in 17 countries. These are the people that are controlling what isn't true in the UK right now.
Controlling the narrative. So while people get heavily focused on what's happening in the Middle East or Ukraine, inside UK, this society is being taken apart, it's being controlled, and free speech is being wiped out by these teams. And of course, they can only do it with the help of vast amounts of money. So the banking system's got to be in there somewhere. Yeah. But we are going to say, whatever you're looking at worldwide, whatever you're worried about, stay focused on what's actually eating away at the constitutional structure of UK. Now, we have to do it. We have to do some comment on what's happening in the Middle East at the moment. And the best starting point is to have a look at what President Trump had to say after his attacks on the Iranian nuclear facility.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. The objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
Well, Ben, I don't know whether that fills you with confidence. And the question is, who is the terrorist or the bully operating in the Middle East? Certainly, Americans got the weight of the military power in that area. But Trump being very upbeat, we don't yet know what the strikes actually did. And there's now more debate over whether they were successful or not. But nevertheless, that's how he announced it. Now, what was he talking about? This little video clip does explain the use of the American bunker busting bombs, but also we've got mainstream reports being confused with films. This is a truly scary report, as it shows us how pitiful American mainstream media has got. Let's have a look at this Fox report.
Yeah, so what we're looking at here is we're being told this is, I think, anywhere from just shy of 200 to 300 feet in depth. There are all kind of reports out there of 1,000 foot, but I think that's more propaganda. So what you end up doing is, if you saw the movie, the latest Top Gun movie, eerily enough, this is that plot kind of coming to fruition in real life. It's not just one bomb. It'll be a bomb after a bomb to get through that penetration.
And just lastly, that's what you're talking about. Can penetrate up to 200 feet below the surface. And then, of course, we'll see it try and put the second one in there and go down in there. Yeah. Let's bring in David Burke, our Top Gun and former Top Gun instructor, retired U.S. Marine Corps officer. Now, David, I don't know how well we did that, but you know this better than anybody. Talk to us about, questions over whether or not this can successfully be done.
Joey Jones just crushed that explanation. You guys hit the nail on the head. So really well done. This absolutely can be done. There is not a cave in the world deep enough to defend itself against the American military if it needs to hit it. And you described the weapon system and the aircraft and the mating of that exactly right. Now, this is a hard problem to solve, but it is absolutely a solvable problem with this system.
Well, there was a comment in our chat box, pathetic, but highly dangerous. We're mixing films. We seem to regard this as a fun report. It's exciting, these bunker busting bombs. But we've seen other reports where in the media, people have been saying, well, it was a bit disappointed because we didn't detect any radiation links. We're dealing with mad people here. They don't know whether they're living a film or real life. Well, against that backdrop, what did Keir Starmer have to say? Let's look at our flaccid Prime Minister in action.
President Trump has said future attacks would be far greater and a lot easier. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran, greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Iran has said the events overnight will have everlasting consequences. Do you agree escalation seems very real? And are you prepared to offer military support, UK military support, if needed?
Well, my focus is on de-escalating the situation. I accept your challenge that there is a risk of escalation. That's a risk to the region. It's a risk beyond the region. And that's why all our focus has been on de-escalating, getting people back around to negotiate what is a very real threat in relation to the nuclear programme. In relation to the UK, we were not involved in the attack. We were given due notice, as we would expect as close allies to the US. And we have been moving assets to the region to make sure that we're in a position to protect our own interests, our personnel and our assets, and of course those of our allies.
Well, there we are, Ben. Prime Minister Peace. He's been doing everything he can to wind down the wars, whether it's Ukraine or with Israel and the Middle East. He's simply been there pushing for peace. Didn't get involved in the American attacks. The British intelligence services not involved. I'm very sure they would have been, because the Americans would have actually appreciated some advice. And but there he is. This is what he says to the public. It's truly outrageous that he can say these sorts of things. Don't know whether you want to comment on that.
Ineffectual and out of the loop, I think, I would say, with Starmer. It looks like he's had his hair done, though. Maybe he was with his stylist over the weekend.
Well, I'm also going to repeat again, when he makes these statements, you don't know whether he's speaking as Prime Minister of the UK, or he's talking on behalf of the World Economic Forum, or he's giving the line required by Israel. We simply do not know who this man works for. Now, let's get into the serious reports. And this is the Iranian foreign minister talking about the attack.
Iran condemns in the strongest terms the United States' brutal military aggression against Iran's peaceful nuclear facilities. It is an outrageous, grave, and unprecedented violation of the fundamental principles of the Charter of the United Nations and international law. Well, I think it is irrelevant to ask Iran to return to diplomacy, because we were in the middle of diplomacy. We were in the middle of talks with the United States when Israelis blew it up. And again, we were in the middle of talks and negotiation with Europeans. Happened only 2 days ago in Geneva, when this time Americans decided to blow it up.
So what he's saying there, absolutely accurate. Iranian at the peace negotiations when they were attacked. No ifs or buts. Now, the following, or the next piece of video clip is from Scott Ritter, an absolutely fantastic statement and analysis of what's actually just taken place. Let's hear what Scott Ritter has to say.
Is marking the anniversary of German perfidy. The world was experiencing American perfidy, that America was involved in engaging in a illegal act of aggression against Iran. And the question is this the kind of new threat that we are talking about? And as an American, this new threat doesn't manifest itself from Iran. It manifests itself from within. What are the traditional values of the United States? We are a nation defined by the rule of law, as established by the Constitution. And when we speak of how we apply on the global scene, understand that the Constitution has in it a clause that says when the United States Senate has ratified a treaty that has been signed by the president, that becomes the law of the land. And I want to remind people that the United Nations Charter is a de facto treaty that has been ratified by the Senate of the United States, signed by the President of the United States, and therefore the United States is constitutionally obliged to comply with the laws that are set forth in the Charter. And one of the principal things is that you will not carry out, there's only two conditions under which a nation can go to war. A nation can go to war if the Security Council of the United Nations has enacted a Chapter 7 resolution under the Charter authorizing military force to be used to resolve a specific threat to international peace and security. No such resolution exists today regarding Iran. The other one is that a nation can carry out legitimate self-defense if they have been attacked, or if they are confronted with the imminent threat of violence, they are allowed to preemptively act to eliminate the imminent threat, but then they are obligated to go to the Security Council to once again turn this situation over to the international body for ultimate resolution. The United States has not been attacked by Iran, and there's nobody that can articulate the potential of such an attack. People who seek to do so by talking about Iran's emergence as a nuclear threshold state forget that at the time of the Israeli attack and the American attack, Iran was at the negotiating table, negotiating a resolution to this issue that eliminated any notion of them not only being a threat, but an imminent threat.
A lot to discuss in that clip, but the key thing is he's saying we need to look inside America for the problem. And of course, the same situation here in UK. We need to look inside UK to understand what is really happening, the decay inside UK that is then fomenting these overseas wars. We'll talk about this more in UK Column Extra, but let's have a look at this last clip. This is Senator Bernie Sanders, who was speaking at a rally when he heard the news about the American strike. Listen to what he has to say and listen to the reaction of the audience.
This is a statement from Donald Trump, quote, "We have completed our very successful attack on the 3 nuclear sites in Iran," etc. I agree. And I want to tell you something. Not only is this news that I've just heard this second alarming, that all of you have just heard, but it is so grossly unconstitutional. All of you know that the only entity that can take this country to war is the U.S. Congress. The president does not have the right.
So a senator here picking up on the key point. Trump is out of control. Keir Starmer is out of control. If we're going to deal with the situation overseas, we've got to deal with what is going wrong inside our own countries, and we must not lose sight of that. We'll discuss these points a lot more in UK Column Extra, which will be after the news for members of UK Column. But in the meantime, what have we got to say to our audience? A huge thank you for everybody who's taken out a membership and is supporting us financially, because we can only do what we do with your financial support. Everything that UK Column is doing is funded by members, long-term members and supporters, and some of them very generous. So we are here because of our support. If you like what we're doing, come on board with that support and sign up for a membership. Thank you very much. Now, tomorrow, going out at 1 o'clock, is an interview I did with Debbie Richan. It's on the subject of parental alienation. But Debbie's been doing a lot of good work to help mothers and I believe some fathers that have been through this appalling experience. She calls herself the Relationship Phoenix. fascinating interview. And I have to say, this lady's doing some really, really good work in the background. So join us for that. Now, Debbie, Diane, apologies, bring you in here because you're going to give us a report on the written material for UK Column. And we've got a couple of articles here.
Yes, thanks, Brian. There's 2 new written articles that were just published this morning on the UK Column website. This one is part 1 of 3 parts that Professor Gloria Moss, who you might remember from her really good article in the Fabian Society from a few weeks ago. She's now doing a 3-part series for us on post-truth in different contexts. So this is part 1 of 3. This one is about science and medicine and post-truth. So take a look at that article if you have a chance. It's really, really very interesting and gives great information in there. And the other one that we've published this morning is the 3rd part in the Baking and Financial series from Joost Landgribe. And this one is about Bitcoin and questioning whether it is a Ponzi scheme. So it gives us some really good information as well about Bitcoin and how crypto assets work in general. And of course, parts 1 and 2 have already been published. And one of those was about how central banks work. And one was about central bank digital currencies or CBDCs. So these are for members only by Dr. Landgribe. So if you're not a member, please sign up so that you can take a look at his articles. They're very good.
Okay, Diane, thank you very much for that. And also a reminder to people that we'll be having our on-location event on the 18th of October in York. Now, people are saying, when will you tell us about the tickets? Very soon, there will be an announcement about when tickets will be on sale. Be patient, it is coming, but we're really looking forward to meeting people at that event because mixing with the UK Column audience and supporters is a wonderful thing for both sides, for us and for you. You've all said you enjoy being there and chilling out with other people, discussing what's happening in the world, also making friends and enjoying the ambience. So do come to that York event if you can. If you're further north or north of the border in Scotland, that's there for you. And as I've said before, we want this one to be a success because if York is a success, we will commit ourselves to the weekend event for UK Column's 20th anniversary next year in 2026. Now, coming up at the weekend, we've also got Sounds Beautiful Festival in Wimborne, Dorset. UK Column team are going to be there. I'm told the weather is going to be good. So we look forward to that event and meeting everybody who comes along. We will see you there. Now, we've also got a Celebrating Freedom of Speech event at Glastonbury, which our own Sandy Adams will be there with Clive de Carle. So that's very exciting. Richard Vobes also speaking. But if you can get along to that event, I'm sure it'll be very good. And here we've got Regional Sovereignty and Devolution, Dissident Meetup Southwest Region. That's Exeter, Sunday, the 20th of July. And Sandy will also be a speaker at that. So if that's people getting out and about to spread the word on what's happening and to warn people and support people in these very strange times, we certainly need to be looking after our children, Ben, because they simply will not leave the babies and young children alone.
They certainly won't. They certainly won't. The vulnerable and the infirm, yeah, the unborn children and the old. Last week we saw news from the death cult that runs the country that they're going to decriminalise full-term abortion. The assisted dying bill went through on Friday. We had an excellent report on the news on Wednesday from Dr. Liz Evans about Ozempic and the damage it's been causing to people across the UK and further afield. And then on Saturday, we had this revelation, this news come up that the NHS is planning to DNA test all babies to supposedly assess their disease risk. And this is the news that DNA sequencing will now take place at birth. Blood will be taken from the umbilical cord. Every newborn baby in England will have their DNA mapped to assess their risk of hundreds of diseases So this is all about preventative healthcare. When we hear about prevention, this is what they're talking about, genomics and genetic engineering. Under NHS plans for the next 10 years, so this 10-year plan hasn't come out yet. Wes Streeting's still working on it, but they're just they're previewing stuff into the media already. But Streeting has said that gene technology would enable the health service to leapfrog disease, so we're in front of it rather than reacting to it. Okay, so the article also says that this was first reported on by the Daily Telegraph. Not strictly true, actually, because it was first reported on by me quite a while back now, just over 2 years ago. This is an interview that I did with James Delingpole. It's the first time I ever stuck my head above the parapet publicly and started talking about what I was seeing in the health system. So go and have a listen to that. And actually it says in there that they're looking to introduce this into the neonatal pathway. And lo and behold, 2 years down the track, that's exactly what they've done. Brian and Debbie have also spoken about this previously, and we'll provide some links to that. So you can go and look at those interviews. Lots of information on the UK Column website. Who's excited about it? All the wrong people. David Cameron, most notably, saying this is fantastic news. It has his full backing. When I first launched Genomics England, so this is a Cameron government initiative, actually was a part of the legacy of the 2012 Olympic Games, interestingly enough, bizarre legacy for an Olympic Games. Basically says the idea of sequencing the genome of every newborn was a long way off, and it proves how much science has come on and cost down in order to make this possible. He's very excited about it. He does warn that there's still lots of issues to get to grips with. Permissions for data use, big problems for actually getting people to sign up for it, ensuring we start with all children, everywhere in the country, not restricting to only some areas or some conditions, etc. So they want all children into the database.
No child left behind is the phrase. Exactly.
This is inclusive, Brian, really importantly. And they're talking about this as being transformational for preventative and personalised healthcare. It's all about you. It's all about saving the NHS, all these kind of wonderful things. What Cameron doesn't mention, though, in his tweet is the fact that actually he got into a bit of bother back in 2021 because he helped the American genomics firm Illumina secure a £123 million uncontested government contract via Matt Hancock, because he personally invited Hancock along to the International Summit on Population Genomics, which is run by Illumina. That you can see Hancock and Cameron on stage there. On the right, that's Jay Flatley, who is the chair of Illumina, which is an American technology company founded in 1998. Interesting name. Are they trying to tell us something? I don't know. But they make the machines that do genomic sequencing, right? So this entire industry runs on the back of technology produced by this country. Who runs it? So straight off the bat, the new chairman, Scott Gottlieb, MD, he's the chair since March this year. He's also on the board of Pfizer. And before that, he was the chair of the FDA. He was the 23rd commissioner of the FDA. Yeah, so one of the key people actually during COVID, who basically spun out of the regulator and then straight into industry. And I would imagine he was being handsomely remunerated for his role there.
One would think so. The other thing I'd need to remind the audience about, of course, David Cameron, who said his belief in Israel was unshakable. UK Column then said, well, which comes first, Mr. Cameron? Is it the UK or is it Israel? And then we have this enormous penetration of the NHS and our health schemes or our health industry across the country by Israel. Was that accidental or was that some backdoor dealing? We don't know, of course, because Cameron never really put his cards on the table. But I think we're entitled to ask the question, as we've now got Israeli health firms coming in alongside Israeli intelligence. I'm talking military intelligence, state security intelligence, mixing it with the UK government and then coming alongside our health system.
Yeah,
I
particularly in the NHS, right? Nicole Junkerman and Matt Hancock and actually a guy called Parker Moss, who was on the board of Genomics England, who was involved in that whole situation as well. So yeah, they're very much in the mix. Now, what's Illumina about? Let's just hear a little bit from Francis de Souza, the former chief executive of Illumina, speaking about the role of the company in COVID-19. Speaking at the World Economic Forum, I believe it was, in 2023. Let's have a listen.
During COVID, so we were called into China in the fall of 2020, 2019, to help them diagnose what was then a flu of unknown origin. And so we did the first sequence of the SARS-CoV-2 genome. That was published on January 10th. And around the world, what happened was a couple of companies, so Moderna in Cambridge and BioNTech in Germany, took that data and started working on their vaccine. Now, what's interesting is that Moderna, for example, has never had the live virus on their site. It was all a software problem from them. I remember talking to Stefan, and he was saying, look, we're basing our entire vaccine program on that data you published. It better be good data, because that's it. That's all we're using. And you can get a sense that Moderna is arguably, one of the most, one of the more important companies in biology right now, and yet it's all a software problem for them. And so that's a use case of once you digitize biology, you can solve profound biological problems. Another
It's a good thing you got it right.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing.
It's a good thing they got it right, Brian. So he was actually in China in 2019, right? So he was invited to China in 2019 by the Chinese government to digitize the COVID virus, which was then used, the software that created was then used by Moderna and BioNTech to generate their vaccines. These are the people that are behind the technology, this entire paradigm that is being ushered into the NHS, embedded into the NHS from birth. Right. And what can this potentially do? So let's have a little look here at this quote from Amy Webb. This fantastic quote. We're talking about improving biology and redesigning organisms for beneficial purposes. It's going to allow us to not just edit genomes, but also, and importantly, write a new code for life. We will have right level permissions for life. That's what this technology, they believe, allows them to do. Look at her there, throwing up the devil horns, very rock and roll. Miss Webb, fascinating. That's pretty terrifying. How else could this potentially be abused? Let's have a little listen to Nita Farahani at the World Economic Forum.
But once you can probabilistically and through modeling be able to much better see what's going to happen. Take, for example, the fact that we already can start to see signs of Alzheimer's many, many decades potentially before a person starts to manifest the condition. Do they want to know? And if they don't want to know, should other people have the ability to know? Should an insurance company be able to make choices about whether to cover them? Should an employer have access to that information to make decisions about whether or not they are somebody that they ought to employ?
So a few members of our chat box said that I've been looking serious during today's news, and I think I've got every reason to. Here we see the absolute danger of these individuals. They are so deluded in their own power to rewrite life. And she mentions Alzheimer's. Maybe the insurance companies need to know that you're going to become a bit...
Even if you decide not to.
Even if you decide not to.
They need to know because you might be a risk.
No compassion. You're going to suffer from Alzheimer's. You're gone, you're out the job, you're on the bin.
Yep.
End of life program for you. These are dangerous individuals. And if I remember correctly, it was David Cameron that soon into his premiership as Prime Minister suddenly announced that by a particular date, so many people in UK would have Alzheimer's. I think it was Alzheimer's. And I think the figure he was talking about was 2 million. And at the time, I was thinking to myself, where are you getting that from? Where's the data that's telling you this? So we know that the seeds for this stuff have been sown many, many years ago. But this is the mindset. So if you wonder how they can bomb Gaza flat and destroy thousands of men, women, children in Gaza or destroy millions of Ukrainians, you are now getting into their mindset. We need to get into their minds. We need to expose what's in their minds, and we need to warn as many people as possible. So, yep, it's serious.
Extremely serious, and not just in the UK, also importantly, all around the world, but as we're about to find out, in particular from Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel.
We came out of COVID first. I described that in my book, my conversations with Albert Bourla of Pfizer. And I persuaded him to give tiny Israel the necessary vaccines to get us out first from the COVID. And the reason I could do that is because we have a database, 98%, a medical database. 98% of our population has digitized medical records and little card. And anywhere you go in any hospital in Israel, north, south, doesn't make any difference. Boom, you punch it in and you know everything about this patient for the last 20 years. I said, we'll use that to tell you whether these vaccines, what do they do to people, not individual people, not with their individual identities, but statistically, what does it do to people with, meningitis? What does it do to people with high blood pressure? What is it? You want to know that. So Israel became, if you will, the lab for Pfizer. And that's how we did it. We got it out and we gave the information to the world. Not only, it's been published in medical magazines and so on. That's a database we have. I intend to bring on that database of personal medical records for entire population, a genetic database, genomes, okay? Give me a saliva sample, volunteer. But I'm sure most people would do it. Maybe we'll pay them. Now we have a genetic record on a medical record of a robust population. You have to have diversified populations. We have people from 100 lands. This is a very powerful engine. Now let pharma companies, let medical companies, let them run algorithms on this database, okay? I'm telling you right away that I'll give preference for a few years to Israeli firms, but you can create, and then to the world, but you can create, a biotechnological industry that is unheard of right now, unimagined even.
A biotechnological industry, and the raw materials are humans, and importantly this week, newborn babies.
So the man responsible for the slaughter in Gaza is using his own population as lab rats. Debbie, this needs to be exposed. You would have thought that a good place to get information flowing would be universities and academia. But is that true?
Well, I'm not Debbie, but I can answer as Diane, Brian.
I'm having a bad day today, aren't I?
That's okay.
She's in the room with us.
Yeah.
Well, it depends.
It's the interview tomorrow. It's everything. Right. So just some updates on the academic freedom situation, which on the surface looks good, but I'd like to provide some thoughts on this. If you don't know, and if you haven't seen my reporting on this previously, there is something called the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act 2023, which was, of course, passed under the previous government. As soon as Labour got in, essentially, the new Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, decided to halt it because she had concerns that the law was potentially damaging to student welfare. She was talking about anti-Semitism and other things like this, that she thought of hate speech would be hurting people's feelings. So the Office for Students, now that they've kind of worked this out, and most of this act is now going into place on the 1st of August, that the Office for Students, which is an independent public body, but does report to Parliament through the Department of Education, whilst not being part of central government, has provided some guidance and published some survey results. And so I would like to go into this a little bit just to see what they have to say in support of the act and how to put this all into place at universities. So first, let's hear this short video clip that I have. Let's first look at this BBC article that I should mention first. BBC telling us that students are ready to be shocked, or should be ready to be shocked, not saying that they are, and offended at university. As I know through my own process of losing my academic career as a full professor, they do not handle well anything that is considered to be offensive. But so let's look at now what this Office for Students video had to say about its new guidance.
Free speech and academic freedom are vital to higher education. In fact, they're vital to society. Without them, there are no new ideas, no productive debate, no challenge to conventional wisdom, and no social progress. Our new free speech guidance illustrates how universities and colleges can protect these rights. It's designed to help universities and colleges navigate their new duties to secure free speech and have a free speech code of practice. These duties will come into force on the 1st of August this year. Right now, universities and colleges need to look at their policies, though we know that some of you are already doing this. These could include things relating to personnel, so appointments, promotions, disciplinary processes, governance and decision making where it affects free speech, research ethics, your existing free speech statement and code of practice, and student and staff training materials should include freedom of speech, as set out in the guidance, and you should provide induction to ensure that your students and staff understand their own free speech rights. You can see the guidance and find out more about free speech and academic freedom on our website.
So we'll put a link in the show notes to the complete guidance if you want to look at all the detail. But basically what I would like to say, I guess, really important part of the guidance is that they have a framework now that they have recommended for determining whether or not there is an issue or not with free speech and whether or not it should be something that gets pursued and investigated with 3 steps. The first step is asking whether the speech is within the law. And that's another question entirely about unlawful speech. There are people like myself and Professor Dennis Hayes, the Director of Academics for Academic Freedom, who believe that all speech is just speech, and there shouldn't be anything lawful about any words because there's no actual violence or anything taking place, but that's another debate. Step 2 is asking if there are any reasonably practicable, that's a difficult word to say, steps to secure the speech, and if yes, take those steps and do not restrict the speech. The guidance illustrates other factors that may affect or not affect what is reasonably practicable, so we need to read the guidance for that. And step 3, are any restrictions prescribed by law and proportionate under the European Convention on Human Rights? And I would have to say that this is one of the things that happened to me was because I have my own views on sex and gender, for example, that those were one of the reasons that I lost my academic career. So let's look separately a bit at both students and academics and how this will affect them. Here's another video from the Office for Students explaining to students that they do have the right to free speech after all. So that's all good to see and good to hear, but I'm terribly not concerned after, working for 20 years in the university system, and especially in the past few years, that students are not going to be able to cope with this very well because they're coming in with a lot of mental health problems, an idea about well-being and what that means, especially those that survived through the lockdowns and weren't able to actually learn social skills. Universities are sort of coddling these students as well, providing these so-called safe spaces on campus where students can go and cry and have someone make a cup of tea and have a therapy dog, as they call them. And so I'm not terribly concerned at this. I'm actually quite concerned that students will not be able to handle this if it actually comes into place. On the side of the academics, there was a survey that was released last week as well by the Office for Students talking about how they have perceived academic and free speech on campus. This was conducted last year in March and April of 2024. The interesting thing to note here is that 77% of the academics who responded identify as left-wing, with only 9% being in the center, 14% being right-wing. Now, I don't believe in left and right dichotomies anymore when it comes to politics, but that just kind of goes to show where they're coming from in terms of their positioning. The other thing as well to note is that there was around, according to the survey, around a fifth of them do not feel free to discuss challenging or controversial topics in their teaching and their research. That increased up to 34% of them who come from ethnic minority backgrounds, which I also thought was interesting. These were similar scores in terms of research and teaching, public speaking, social media. Worth noting for me, as a female academic who is no longer a female academic, is that a fifth of the female academics say that they did not feel free to discuss their ideas in their research as I was counseled for doing so, compared to 1 in 10 or 11% of male academics saying the same thing. So the risk seems to be higher for female academics, including me, because I was very senior. For the majority of them who did experience negative treatment, investigations, disciplinary procedures, and so on, 38% of this was due to views on sex and gender, such as mine, and 27% based on international politics, which again was one of my situations that I talked about as well. So we can see here that these things are happening. I'm not entirely convinced that having that many, 77% of people who are identifying as left-wing is not really going to benefit those of us who do not have left-wing ideas. So I would imagine that these scores would be even higher for those of us who are not so-called left-wing, Brian.
Diane, thank you very much for that. And I've just picked up on, of course, people listening in will have only heard the music in the video. So we'll say a discussion on what free speech is and why it's important in academia and for students. And one of the key things is because you need free speech in order to generate new ideas, which that's a pretty powerful argument in its own right. So encouraging from you that we are starting to see a bit of a backlash happen, but a lot more work to be done. But take us somewhere brighter to end today's UK column news with, Diane.
Yes, brighter, assuming that we still have the sun in the future. And I say that because I watched the live stream that Sonia Poulton provided of the geoengineering rally in London on Saturday, which we have been advertising and mentioning on the news for the past few weeks. And unfortunately, none of us from UK Column were able to make it to London for the event. But watching the live stream, it seemed like there was a pretty high vibration sort of atmosphere, kind of similar to what you would experience if you came to one of our on-location events, or like in the freedom rallies that we had in 2020 and 2021 when people were protesting the lockdowns and the mandates. I heard from a lot of members on Saturday and Sunday because I was posting about watching the live stream and from my home here. And I got some photos sent to me directly that they gave me their express permission to provide on the news. Here's one from Mark wearing his UK Column t-shirt, which he said got some compliments. So that was really good to hear. So I guess we were actually represented by some t-shirts and so on, even though none of us were able to make it. So that was really good to see it. It was good to see that there was such a good environment for such a discussion of what is, of course, a serious topic to many of our members. So, but really good to see that.
Diane, thank you very much. Yes, huge thank you to everybody supporting the column. We're here because of you, and we do remember that every day. We must finish today's news. A lot of heavy material today. It needs to be put on the table. Don't get distracted with everything happening overseas. The biggest danger, we believe, is in this country, and it's unfolding really quickly. Let's get it exposed. Diane, thank you for joining me. Ben, thank you for joining me. Stay with us if you're a UK Column member. Extra time in a few minutes, and we will see you then. In the meantime, Bye-bye. UK Column News will be back on Wednesday at 1 o'clock.